My name is Sophia Andrews, and I was baptized in and attended the Lutheran Church until I was 7, and my father had a falling out, at which point we no longer attended church. I knew enough from this experience that church was a good thing, and that I wanted it to be part of my adult life. My husband Scott and I were married in 2005, and we were regular attendees at a local evangelical church. We loved it there, and we were fed and nourished on our Christian journey. I knew, however, that at some point we would need to seek out a church that offered confirmation so that I could cap off the baptism that I'd received as an infant. I'd been taught enough as a child about baptism to know it was something that could not be done over. In the evangelical tradition, baptism of infants is not considered valid. Thus, my next step in their church would have been to have been rebaptized as an adult. I knew that confirmation was my true next step. There was no possible way I could choose to be rebaptized. In addition to my head knowledge of this, I'd also experienced graces in my personal life that were most logically linked to my baptism. After our beloved longtime pastor at the evangelical church retired, an opportune moment presented itself in 2013 for me to move towards confirmation in the Lutheran Church of my baptism. The Lutheran Church is so similar to the Catholic Church in many ways. And during the course of asking many questions and doing much research, I came to understand that it was the Catholic Church alone that holds the fullness and completeness of truth. It was the Catholic Church that was founded by Jesus Christ himself, and it was through this church that God desired to pour out his graces upon us through the sacraments. Upon this realization, I could do none else but to join this church. Thus, I was confirmed into the Catholic Church on June 29, 2014. I decided to help with RCIA classes as my husband Scott made his own journey into the Catholic Church, and I wanted to walk with him intimately through this process. Besides, I love theology and especially Catholic apologetics, and RCIA is a great way to immerse oneself in this. Scott and I stayed on as helpers as long as we could for subsequent years of RCIA classes. I loved sharing my faith journey with others and learning about each of their fascinating journeys. It was inspiring and stimulating to engage in discussion and learning together and to experience the intimacy and personal connection that comes with a small group setting. Even after doing this for several years, I learned or took something new away from each and every class. As one with a passion for theology and especially Catholic apologetics, being a helper for RCIA was a perfect fit. I found the class to be stimulating to my head and my heart, even after helping with it for several years. My favorite part was hearing each person's personal faith journey story. There were countless unique ways that each person had ended up in the class. I loved that there was zero pressure on any of the participants to become Catholic. We all understood it had to be 100% a free will decision and a true calling from God. Our classes consisted of those who knew for certain they wanted to be Catholic, all the way to those who wanted to know straight from the source what the Catholic Church officially teaches. As many know, there is much misinformation out there about our church. We even had participants that were already Catholic, but wanted to brush up on what the church believes. Spouses of participants were also often present and active participants themselves. I found the environment to be very open and conducive to discussion, questions, and sharing. Each participated as much or as little as they wanted, and no one was ever put on the spot or pressured. I looked forward to these classes each week and enjoyed the intimacy and personal connection, just of being part of that small group. And I helped with it for several years, and never did I stop learning new things. It was a nourishing, rewarding walk with the other participants and helpers as our paths crossed on our faith journeys. Well, above all, I appreciate the stability and consistency of the Catholic Church. I know that it isn't going away and will be here when Jesus returns. Jesus himself promised that the gates of hell wouldn't prevail against his church, and I know that I can take him at his word. The church has weathered countless forces of destruction since her inception, both from outside and more painfully from within. Still, she has proven herself to be trustworthy, as she, in her official capacity, through immutable teachings, has stood counter to the culture and even to other Christians at times. She is like a light on a hill. I feel this immense sense of protection, like the Catholic Church is a large and well-built boat on which we can seek shelter from the storm. No longer do we have to place our trust in rickety life rafts that are tossed and turned by the waves and often swallowed up by the sea. My faith and participation in the church is not dependent on specific pastors, priests, church councils, or anything. Instead, I rely solely on Christ, and I know this is the church that he founded. He implored us to be one, as he and the Father are one. Like St. Peter, I rhetorically ask, to where else could I go? Becoming Catholic was inevitable in light of all of this. In my desire to be obedient to Christ, I have become a most grateful beneficiary, as I have inherited the privilege of receiving the maximum outpouring of grace, which God intended would be bestowed upon us through the sacraments. Seeking shelter on the big, safe boat, I'm so grateful that I answered God's call. It feels good to be home.